Hello, it's Jason with Got You Covered Up North. XJ project time! Woo! We are going to put a bumper on the Jeep today because it doesn't have a bumper. So stay tuned and I will show you how I'm going to build a bumper with a cheap Harbor Freight welder and a cheap Harbor Freight angle grinder and then an assortment of hand tools. And we'll see if we can get it done. Alright, so buying a new bumper, over $100. Getting a used one from my local junkyard, $85. So what I did was bought this here piece of steel. I was looking for a 5x2 by 1/8 of an inch steel. I didn't have that, so I ended up with a 5.5 by 2 by 3/16. It's a 3/16 steel, which is right at the limits of my little cheap Harbor Freight welder, but figured it would be okay. $40 for that big piece of steel. Gonna mock it up and give it a little character, and then I've got some scrap lying around. We'll use it to fill in the ends and things. But today is the get the bumper done day, I guess. So what we're gonna do, the story I was told when I bought the Jeep is they got this thing stuck in the snow, and rather than hooking up a chain to the trailer hitch there, they hooked it up to the rear bumper and pulled it right off. So I've got the brackets, the original brackets, and I think, you know, they're solid. There's some surface rust on them, but we're gonna scrape those down and I'm gonna weld some steel on them to make them straight, and then we're gonna just put the new bumper on that. So first I got to remove these, make sure I can get them out, otherwise I got to weld it while it's on the Jeep here, and then I might have to remove the tow hitch here so I can get the tools up in there to get these bolts out, or get them back in. Actually, getting them out will be relatively easy here. So we'll see what happens. We'll get the tools out and we'll start playing. Alright, so we've already run into the first snafu. Got almost all of the bolts off these brackets, but that one, I don't know if you can see it on the camera there, is so rusted, the bolt's pretty much gone. It's just kind of being held in place by the rust. So I've either got to drill it out or just weld the bumper to these while they're on the frame, which I thought I might have to do. So I think we're gonna go that route just because I don't have a whole lot of time today, and getting that drilled out and then removed and figuring out what to do after that just seems like too much of a hassle right this second for the little time I have. So I think we'll just remove this drip edge thing here from the old bumper and just start welding while it's on the frame and go from there. Well, since we have to weld the bumper on the Jeep, since I can't get these brackets off, what I did was just ground down the bare metal along the brackets, and then just out of some scrap I cut these, and we're going to weld them right on there. Since these are at an angle, I don't know if you can tell, but that's pretty much straight. These sit back at an angle, so we're just gonna weld these on there so that I have a straight edge, and that big 2x5.5 or 2.5x5 or whatever the heck it is just sits on here a little smoother. And then I was also, I mean, my whole concept kind of has to get turned around here, because I was also expecting to keep that little drip edge thing on there, and probably not going to do that now since it's busted to pieces. But originally my my thought was to have the bumper sit back here, but then I thought I'll never get the bolts in. I won't be able to reach up to get the bolts in, so I can't. I've got to leave it out here. But now, since I'm leaving those bolts on, I might go with my original idea of having it sit back a ways. So we'll see. We'll see what happens as we go along. I'm sort of designing it as I go now, which isn't the best way to do things. So there we are. Looky there. Not too shabby. Welding skills, still a lot to be desired, but I pounded on them with a big old hammer. Where's my big old hammer? Pounded on them with a big old hammer, and they ain't going anywhere. So there we go. Next step is to give the bumper a little characteristic and figure out how we're cutting it to slide on here and see where we go. So to give it a little more character, I measured out from where the brackets on the Jeep are, and they're at 12 inches. So I started at 11 inches and cut this little angle out. Now we're going to clamp this down and weld it up and grind it down smooth, and it should just give it a little more character than just a big flat piece of metal on the back. It's all welded and ground down. My welding job on that side, not great. On this side, much better. So I think this is going to be like out facing the back, just because it looks neater. It's a better weld. So figure out what to do on the end caps. Just put some scrap on there, and then we'll get the other side and figure out how we're going to mount it up there. Well, there we go. Looky there. Isn't it a wee beauty? So yeah, it's just sort of being held up there by a 2x4, but pretty dang pleased with how it came out. Still need to cut into the back. I think we're going to hang it now. We're going to cut a notch out of there and hang it on the brackets rather than just welding it. My original plan was to just weld it right there and call it good, but since I can't get those brackets out and that grip edge is gone and I'm pretty much out of scrap steel, so I got a big old gap there. I'm just gonna cut a notch out and we'll move it in another inch and a half. So there's the notch we cut out, and ground that down a little bit, both sides, and see if I can do this with one hand, but we're gonna try and set. Oh my gosh, that's heavy. Okay. So we're trying to get the bumper onto those brackets, just like that. And close the door, make sure that closes. And that's how she'll look when she's all done. Not the best looking thing in the world, but definitely a lot better than not having a bumper at all. So there we are. It is all welded on. And started taking a flapper wheel to get some of that surface rust off. Oh, I'm getting excited. Almost done. So she's on there good. You know, I can even get up here and jump up and down, and she ain't moving. So excelente. Now I'm going to take these pieces. These are the ones I cut out of there to fit those on, and cut them down and get them welded up on the end. Shape it up a little bit, make it look a little nicer, and then I got some undercoating. Me gusta muy mucho. Look at there. You'll see, if I had more scrap, I'd build a, I'd do it better. I'd finish it off, but I don't. And I may not have mentioned, but the cops pulled me over for not having a bumper. They let me off with a warning, but said I had to get it taken care of this weekend. So that's why I'm kind of in a hurry. I got one day. Tomorrow's Easter, so I've got to finish it by today. And the daylight is running out. So, yeah, I think I may just call it good right here. And I've got some undercoat. We'll throw that on there. And maybe, I don't know, I gotta think about it. I'll let you know. Alright, here she is, calling it done. I don't know how well it's coming out on the camera, but all I used to coating on it was just this Rust-Oleum undercoating. And it was like $8 at Tractor Supply, and came out pretty good. Little texture. The texture is not perfect. It may just be my spraying technique. I'm an airbrush artist, not a car painter or undercoater. But all in all, let's take a step back. Yuppers. Alrighty, so bumper, $100, over $100 if I bought it new, $85 at my local junkyard. For this one, it was $40 in steel, which they didn't have what I was looking for. I was looking for 1/8 inch 2x5, and I ended up with a 3/16 2.5x5. So it was a few bucks more. I was figuring probably about $30 worth of steel, and then $8 or $9 for that undercoating. So, you know, for less than $50, I got myself a bumper. Doesn't look amazing, but looks pretty decent, and will keep me from getting a ticket, which is probably the most important part. You know, I probably should have drilled those bolts out on those mounts and done it right, because now if I ever want to take it off of there, if I want to go with a rock crawler or something, a better bumper, something I buy for $400 or $500, I'm gonna have to cut that out of there, with a Sawzall or something. But it is what it is. For $50 and a bunch of cheap Harbor Freight tools and just a basic assortment of hand tools, fabricated a bumper. Started at 11 o'clock this morning. It is now almost 4:30, so a little longer than I was anticipating, but for somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, it was all right. So thanks for watching. Again, it's not a great how-to, but if you're thinking about fabricating your own bumper, you see a schmo like me is able to do it, maybe it'll just give you a little more confidence to do it yourself. So subscribe if you want, because I've got a lot more to do, and if you want to see me tackle any project before you have to tackle it, so maybe I can give you a heads up as to what you're in for, just drop me a line and I'll see what I can do, because so much has to be fixed on this Jeep yet that if you say, hey, fix that, probably has to be fixed. So subscribe if you want, and I'll see you next time. Alright, before I go, let me show you a mistake I made so that you don't make the same mistake. See that? It wasn't there 5 minutes ago. As I was grabbing the tools out of the back of the Jeep, somebody rested their knee up against the fresh undercoating that was just on the bumper, and there we go. Big old splotch. I had just enough left in the can to kind of give it a little spritz over. So from far away, it's not horrible, but it went from being a decent paint job to totally redneck. But there we go.